At my graduation party, Mom said, "You didn't earn this achievement, your sister did." I raised my glass proudly and said, "Cool, then she can pay your bills too." I delivered it with a smile. Calm, controlled. The kind of smile you offer someone who's finally made it clear they were never on your side to begin with. There was a stunned silence after I raised my glass. Maybe 5-10 seconds, but it felt like time stretched out, just long enough for me to see everyone's expressions shift. The laughter died. The clinking of forks against plates stopped, and my mother, still holding a half-empty wine glass, blinked like she wasn't sure what she just heard. But I knew what I'd said. For the first time in my life, I meant every word. The party was supposed to be a celebration, my graduation from college. Not just any college either. I had worked my way through one of the top public universities in the state. I paid for most of it myself: scholarships, side jobs, late-night tutoring sessions, early morning shifts at the campus cafe. It wasn't pretty, but I did it. I made it, and no one in my family had lifted a finger to help. But that didn't stop me from inviting them. I rented out the patio of a local restaurant with what little I had saved, bought trays of food, decorations, drinks. I even paid the musician, just a guy with a guitar and a voice that could make you feel something. I wanted that night to feel like something, like a turning point. And maybe it was, just not in the way I expected. Everyone showed up. My dad, silent but supportive in the way he always was. My aunt and uncle who'd always kind of straddled the line between family and spectators. My little cousins running around with balloons tied to their wrists. And, of course, my mom. She showed up an hour late, already half-buzzed, wearing a wrinkled designer dress and a smugness I knew too well. My sister Natalie didn't come. She rarely did. But somehow, she was still there, hovering in every sentence my mother spoke, especially the one that flipped the whole night upside down. "You didn't earn this achievement," my mom said, standing up to make some kind of speech, or maybe just to hear herself talk. "Your sister did." The words weren't slurred. They weren't said with a laugh. They landed hard, with the weight of years behind them. And in that moment, I realized something. I had been waiting my whole life for this woman to tell me she was proud of me. And she never would. So I raised my glass like we were still celebrating and said, "Cool, then she can pay your bills too." It wasn't loud. I didn't need it to be. People heard. People understood. And some of them smiled. Not out of amusement, but recognition. I set the glass down, looked at my mother one last time, and I left. No explanations, no goodbyes, no turning back. I didn't go home right after the party. I didn't have it in me to sit in my quiet apartment and replay every second of what had just happened. Instead, I drove. No destination, no plan. Just streetlights and silence. Somewhere around midnight, I ended up at the lookout point on the edge of town, the place teenagers used to sneak off to, where the city looked smaller, manageable. I parked, killed the engine, and sat with the windows down. The cold didn't bother me. It kept me present. I kept thinking about that sentence. "You didn't earn this achievement, your sister did." What achievement? The degree I clawed my way to over 5 exhausting years? The job I landed after a brutal round of interviews? The debt I managed to avoid by living on ramen and refusing to go out when everyone else did? What had Natalie done to deserve it more? That question had hovered over my life for as long as I could remember. Growing up, it was always Natalie who got the easy forgiveness, the second chances, the applause for showing up. She dropped out of community college after one semester, and my mom still called her the smart one. When I got my first job at 16 to help pay for my own school clothes, Natalie was on her 3rd warning at the mall boutique and still got a pat on the back for working hard. But I never had hard proof of the difference in treatment. Not until my junior year of college. I came home one weekend to find a bill on the kitchen counter. A tuition invoice, Natalie's name on it. Paid in full. That was the first time I knew, beyond a gut feeling, that things were exactly as lopsided as I'd always feared. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to start a fight. I figured maybe they couldn't help with mine because money was tight. Maybe they were trying their best. Maybe they assumed I didn't need it. But standing on that patio hours earlier, hearing my mother praise the daughter who wasn't even there while dismissing everything I had sacrificed, it shattered the last of those maybes. That was when I started pulling the thread, digging into old records, remembering things I'd buried, looking at who they chose to save and who they expected to survive alone. It was never about money. It was never about achievement. It was about belief. My parents, my mother especially, never believed in me. I stared out at the dark city and whispered, just to myself, "That's over now." I didn't mean the argument. I meant the pretending, the hoping, the effort. I was done reaching for a hand that was never going to reach back. The thing about growing up overlooked is that you learn how to disappear quietly, respectfully, even when you're standing in the middle of your own life. That night at the lookout, though, something changed. For the first time, I didn't want to disappear. I wanted out, not just out of the party, not just away from my mother's voice. I wanted out of them, my family. For a long time, I told myself that earning their approval was just a matter of time. That if I worked hard enough, got good enough grades, landed the right job, something would click into place. They'd see me. They'd finally see me. But they never did. And it wasn't like they were cruel in a cartoon villain way. That would have been easier to walk away from. It was more like being invisible unless they needed something. My mom needed help with taxes. I was the responsible one. My dad needed someone to fix his laptop. Of course, I was the tech guy. Natalie wrecked her car again. I was expected to drive her to interviews for jobs she'd never take. They didn't hate me. That would have taken effort. They just didn't care. That realization simmered for a few days after the party. I didn't respond to the texts or voicemails. My aunt messaged me on Facebook saying my mom wasn't herself that night, that she didn't mean it. My dad left a voicemail saying, "Please don't let one moment ruin everything." But it wasn't one moment. It was every moment. The little comments over the years, the way they'd tell Natalie she was finding herself when she failed, but tell me to grow up when I struggled. The time my mom called me too intense because I wanted to talk about career goals, and later that same night she proudly announced that Natalie had started a fashion blog in her bedroom, a blog that never published a single post. The resentment I buried for so long started surfacing in flashes, memories I didn't even know were still alive. Like when I broke my arm in high school and still got lectured for missing practice, while Natalie failed the whole semester and was given a trip to Miami to relax. Or when I got my acceptance letter to college and all my mom said was, "Hope you're not expecting a handout." I wasn't. I never was. And still, I gave my time, my money, my patience, my silence. But now I had nothing left to give. No dramatic confrontation. No shouting match. No, "you'll regret this" monologue. I just stopped. Stopped calling. Stopped texting. Stopped hoping. They wanted a version of me that didn't exist. The quiet supporter, the stable sibling, the shadow in the corner clapping for everyone else. And I'd played that role so well for so long, I almost forgot I was allowed to leave the stage. The decision didn't come in some dramatic swell of music and clarity. It came on a Tuesday, just a regular Tuesday, 2 days after the party. I woke up, made coffee, sat at the tiny kitchen table in my one-bedroom apartment, and stared at the framed photo of my college graduation, the only picture I'd asked the waiter to take before I left the restaurant. In the background, you can see people laughing, plates still full, a balloon caught mid-drift. But I wasn't looking at the party. I was looking at myself. I didn't look proud or even relieved. I looked tired, like someone who had carried a weight for so long he didn't know he could put it down. That's when I reached for my phone. Not to text, not to call, but to block. First my mom, then my dad, then Natalie, then the family group chat that never included me in anything unless someone needed a loan or help filling out paperwork. One by one, I silenced them. I didn't write a farewell message. I didn't post anything vague or cryptic online. I just deleted the noise. And then, I packed. I'd been holding on to that apartment out of habit, close enough to home in case they needed me, far enough to keep some boundaries. But it wasn't really mine. It was a waiting room, a middle ground between trying and giving up. Now I was done waiting. I sold most of my furniture on Facebook Marketplace, used the money to pay off the last of my student loans, and transferred the lease to a friend from work. Within 2 weeks, I was gone. New city, new apartment, new number, no fanfare. The only thing I took with me, aside from the essentials, was the diploma. I had it framed, finally, and hung it on the wall above my desk. Not to show off, not for motivation, but as proof that I did it on my own. That it mattered, even if no one else had said it. Even if my mom had stood in front of a room full of people and tried to erase me. I was still here. I was still standing. And for the first time, I was standing alone. Not because I'd been pushed out, but because I had walked away on purpose. It's funny how loud the world used to feel before I cut them off. Not just the actual voices, the constant opinions, criticisms, passive-aggressive jabs, but the mental noise. That low hum of, should I call? Or, maybe if I explain it this time, they'll get it. Once that was gone, replaced by silence, I expected to feel lonely. But I didn't. I felt free. The first month after moving was the hardest. Not because I missed them, but because I kept waiting for the guilt to hit me. That familiar weight of obligation, the voice in my head saying I was being selfish or dramatic. But it never came. Instead, I found myself waking up without that knot in my stomach, the one I'd carried for so long, I thought it was just part of being alive. I'd make coffee and sit by the window of my new apartment, smaller than the last one but entirely mine, and feel something close to peace. I got a job at a marketing firm downtown. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me structure. My coworkers didn't know my history. They didn't know about Natalie or my mom or the graduation party. They just knew me as I was now, quiet but competent, friendly but private. It was like being born again, in a way, a clean slate. My aunt found me on LinkedIn after about 6 weeks. She sent a message saying my mom was beside herself and that I needed to stop this childish game. I read it 3 times before blocking her too. Not out of anger, but because I finally understood. They would never see what happened as anything but a tantrum on my part. A phase, a negotiation tactic. They couldn't imagine that I was actually gone. But I was. And with each passing day, the decision felt more right, more necessary. Like removing a splinter that had been festering for years. It hurt to pull it out, but the relief was immediate. I started therapy finally. Not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand why I'd stayed so long, why I'd accepted so little. The therapist, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach, helped me see that I'd been trained from childhood to be the fixer, the responsible one, the emotional support beam for a family that was always on the verge of collapse. You were parentified, she told me during our 3rd session. Made to feel responsible for adults who should have been taking care of you. It wasn't a revelation, exactly, but hearing someone else say it, someone objective, someone who had no stake in the family dynamics, it validated what I'd felt but couldn't name. I started journaling, started reconnecting with old friends I'd lost touch with because my family had taken so much of my time and energy, started dating, casually at first, then more seriously, started living like someone who believed they deserved good things. And then, 4 months after I left, my mom showed up at my door. I still don't know how she found my address. Maybe through a mutual friend, maybe through my old landlord. It doesn't matter. What matters is that when I opened the door and saw her standing there, hair freshly dyed, wearing the pearl earrings she saved for important occasions, I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, no hope. Just a calm certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. "Can I come in?" she asked, like it was a normal visit, like we'd been in touch all along. "No," I said, not harshly, just firmly. "I don't think that's a good idea." She looked genuinely shocked, as if she'd expected me to crumble at the sight of her, to apologize for disappearing, to beg for forgiveness. When I didn't, her expression hardened. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You can't just cut off your family because of one little comment." "It wasn't one comment," I said. "It was my whole life." We stood there, the doorway between us like a line in the sand. She tried guilt next, then anger, then a strange attempt at motherly concern. None of it landed. None of it moved me. I just kept saying no, calmly, until she finally left. I closed the door and waited for the breakdown, the second-guessing, the urge to run after her and take it all back. But again, it never came. Instead, I felt lighter, like I'd passed some test I didn't know I was taking. My father called a week later. I let it go to voicemail. His message was different from my mother's approach, softer, sadder. He said he missed me, said he understood why I left, said he wished things could be different. For a moment, I almost called him back, almost. But then he said, "Your mother just wants what's best for you. She always has." And I knew nothing had changed. He was still enabling her, still rewriting history to make her the hero, or at least not the villain, still expecting me to be the one to bend, to forgive, to forget. I deleted the voicemail and blocked his number too. It wasn't easy. None of it was easy. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was making a mistake, if I was being too harsh, if I would regret this when they were gone. But those doubts grew quieter over time, drowned out by the sound of my own life taking shape. I started remembering who I was before them, before the constant comparisons to Natalie, before the dismissal of my achievements, before the expectation that I would always be there to clean up everyone else's messes. I started remembering the kid who loved to draw, who wanted to travel, who believed he could build something meaningful. That kid was still there, buried, but not gone. And for the first time in decades, he had room to breathe. A year passed, then another. Life settled into new rhythms, ones I chose deliberately. I got promoted at work, started taking night classes in graphic design, something I'd always wanted to pursue but had pushed aside for more practical paths. Made real friends, the kind who showed up without wanting something in return. I dated a woman named Claire for 8 months. It ended amicably when she got a job offer in Seattle, but those months taught me something important. I could be loved without having to earn it, without having to diminish myself to make someone else feel bigger, without having to apologize for taking up space. The holidays were the hardest, especially at first. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, days when family is supposed to matter most. I spent the first Christmas alone in my apartment with takeout and old movies. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. Just quiet. Too quiet, maybe. The second Christmas, I accepted an invitation from a coworker to join his family's celebration. They were loud, welcoming, completely unconcerned with status or appearance. His mother kept refilling my plate without asking. His father told terrible jokes that somehow got funnier as the night went on. His siblings argued about politics but hugged before dessert. I watched them all night, trying to understand what made them different from my family. It wasn't money. They had plenty of financial struggles. It wasn't education or culture or religion. It was something simpler. They genuinely liked each other. They wanted to be in that room together. I cried in my car on the way home, not from sadness, but from the realization that I hadn't imagined it. Families like that existed. The kind where love wasn't conditional, where support wasn't transactional, where your achievements weren't weapons to be used against someone else. That night changed something in me. I stopped seeing my decision to leave as a rejection of family itself. It was a rejection of a specific dynamic, a specific toxicity, and in its place, I could build something new. I started volunteering at a community center teaching basic computer skills to seniors. I joined a recreational soccer league. I adopted a cat from the shelter, a one-eyed tabby named Captain who greeted me at the door every day like I was the most important person in the world. Slowly, carefully, I built a chosen family. People who saw me clearly and valued what they saw. People who celebrated my wins without keeping score. People who showed up when it mattered. There were still hard days. Days when I'd see a mother and son laughing together at a cafe and feel that old ache. Days when I'd accomplish something meaningful and have no one to call who remembered the beginning of the journey. Days when I'd find myself typing out a text to my dad before remembering that bridge was burned. But those days grew fewer and farther between. And the good days, the days of genuine connection, of progress, of peace, they multiplied. I started therapy again, this time with a focus on healing rather than just understanding. My therapist suggested writing letters I'd never send, to my mother, my father, Natalie, even to my younger self. At first, they were angry, bitter, full of all the things I'd never said. But over time, they evolved into something more like forgiveness. Not for them, but for me. Permission to stop carrying their failures as my own. 3 years after I left, I ran into my cousin at a grocery store. We'd been close as kids but drifted apart as adults. She looked surprised to see me, then nervous, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to talk to me. "How are you?" she asked, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "I'm good," I said, and I meant it. Really good. She nodded, glanced around as if checking if anyone was watching, then said, "They miss you, you know." I didn't ask who they were. I didn't need to. "How's Natalie?" I asked instead. My cousin's expression said everything. "Same old Natalie. Living with your parents again. Lost another job." I nodded, not surprised but not vindicated either. Just sad, in a distant way. "And you?" I asked. "How are you doing?" Her face brightened. She told me about her new job, her fiancé, the house they were saving for. Real things, important things. When she finished, she looked at me with something like admiration. "You were right to leave," she said quietly. "I didn't get it then, but I do now." We exchanged numbers before parting ways. I didn't expect anything to come of it, but she texted the next day. We met for coffee. Talked about safe topics at first, then deeper ones. She became the one thread from my old life that I didn't cut. A reminder that growth was possible, that patterns could be broken. And that was enough. More than enough. 5 years after I walked away, my father had a heart attack. My cousin called me on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of a client presentation when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it, finished the meeting, and only checked the message during my lunch break. "Uncle John in hospital. Heart attack. Serious. Thought you should know." I stared at those words for a long time, waiting for the rush of emotion, guilt, grief, panic, something. But all I felt was a strange, hollow stillness. Like looking at a photograph of a place I used to live but couldn't quite remember. I called my cousin back, got the details, thanked her, hung up. Then I sat at my desk, hands folded, watching the cursor blink on my computer screen. 5 years. 5 years of birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays without them. 5 years of building a life that wasn't defined by what I wasn't getting from my family. 5 years of healing. And now this. I didn't rush to the hospital. I didn't book a flight that day or even that week. Instead, I took a personal day and went to see my therapist. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I explained the situation. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Do you feel obligated to go?" I thought about it. No, not obligated, but curious, maybe. She nodded. "Curious about what?" "About whether anything has changed. About whether I've changed." We talked for the full hour, and by the end, I had my answer. I would go, not out of duty or guilt, but as a test, to see if I could face them without being pulled back into old patterns. To see if I was truly as healed as I believed. I booked a flight for the following weekend. Reserved a hotel room, not wanting to stay in anyone's home. Rented a car. Made all the practical arrangements with a strange detachment, like I was planning a business trip to a city I'd never visited. My cousin met me at the airport. She hugged me tightly, whispered, "Thank you for coming," in my ear. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. The hospital was exactly as I remembered hospitals to be. Too bright, too cold, smelling of disinfectant and despair. My cousin led me through the maze of corridors to the cardiac unit, stopped outside a room, squeezed my hand. "He's awake," she said. "They did surgery. He's stable." I nodded again. "Your mom's in there," she added, watching my face carefully. "And Natalie comes and goes." "Okay," I said, finding my voice at last. "I'm okay." She didn't look convinced, but opened the door anyway. The room was dim, the blinds drawn against the afternoon sun. My father looked small in the hospital bed, diminished by tubes and monitors. My mother sat in a chair beside him, her back to the door, her hand resting on his. Neither of them noticed me at first. I stood in the doorway, watching them, feeling like an intruder in a private moment. Then my father's eyes drifted toward the door, widened slightly, and fixed on my face. "John," he said, his voice a rasp. My mother turned, startled. For a moment she just stared, as if she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. Then she stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "You came," she said, and I couldn't tell if it was an accusation or a thank you. "I did," I replied, stepping into the room but keeping my distance. My father tried to sit up, winced, settled back against the pillows. "Son," he said, and his eyes filled with tears. I moved closer to the bed, still not touching anyone, still maintaining that crucial space between us. "How are you feeling?" I asked, the question absurdly normal under the circumstances. "Been better?" he said with a weak smile. Then, more seriously, "But better now that you're here." My mother hovered at the edge of my vision, uncertain, uncharacteristically quiet. I glanced at her, nodded a greeting, then turned back to my father. "The doctors say you'll recover," I said. Not a question. "That's what they tell me." He paused, swallowed hard. "Takes more than this to get rid of me." An awkward silence fell. 5 years of absence stretched between us like a chasm too wide to cross with small talk. I considered leaving, having done what I came to do, seen him alive, confirmed he would stay that way. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Finally, my father spoke again. "I've thought about you every day," he said. "Wondered how you were doing. If you were happy." "I am," I said. "Happy, I mean." He nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." Another pause. "I'm sorry, John. For everything." The words hung in the air between us. Simple words. Words I'd imagined hearing 1,000 times in 1,000 different scenarios. But never like this. Never in this sterile room with its beeping monitors and antiseptic smell. "I know I wasn't the father you deserved," he continued when I didn't respond. "I let things happen that shouldn't have happened. I didn't protect you." My mother made a small sound, something between a gasp and a protest, but she didn't interrupt. "I was weak," my father said, "and you paid the price for that weakness." I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness exactly, but a loosening, a letting go of something I hadn't realized I was still holding. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. He reached out his hand, the one without the IV, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. His skin felt paper thin, the bones beneath fragile as bird wings. "I don't expect anything from you," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I understand why you left. And I don't blame you." I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. "And I'm proud of you," he added. "Always have been." This time the tears came. Not a flood, just a silent overflow, like a cup finally filled to its brim.